U of T, and the only way we can do so as president is we unite all of the VP portfolios, work with them very, very diligently, and present a united front to the government, to U of T, to the public. And I think this is what we're trying to do. And let's try to bring this union back.
Hi, I'm happy to provide a closing statement on my campaign. I've been really, really excited to campaign on this campus with optimism and with positivity, because that's the only way that we're going to deal with the major issues before us. I'm a proven grassroots organizer. I worked with the GSU over the past year on food insecurity, on affordability. I work with Regenesis. We just launched a project to bring reusable plates into the campus infrastructure. We're currently working on bringing a campus grocery store, and that proposal is there. And so I know that the UTSU has a fixed budget and amount of money to spend. I also know what we can't control. So given that, I know that to fight OSAP, we have to work with the Canadian Federation of Students, which is in partnership with the UTSU. How do we reform that to actually make that happen? I raised money with the GSU. I received enough signatures, so now there's a $200,000 levy that the GSU has next year to actually address food insecurity. And so I know all of the tools are at our disposal. And so I'm really excited to get to work on all of these projects, because I'm already connected, and I really think that this position can give me the chance to actually, work on all of these issues. So thank you.
Thank you. We now have time for questions from the audience. So if anyone has a question, raise your hand, and a microphone will be brought to you.
Thank you. This question is directed towards Adrian. So the parts of your campaign that you have highlighted the most seem to do with student life, orientation, homecoming, social events. That also seems to be the part of your background that you seem to be most proud of, organizing the various balls at Trinity. So why do you need presidential power to put these initiatives in? There is a VP student life, and the VP student life is elected separately from the president, whose priorities may not be aligned with yours. Why do you need presidential power to make these initiatives happen? And how are you going to engage with the grassroots advocacy side that this position demands of you as the chief executive of the UTSU?
100%. Like I said, I think the position, the responsibility of president is to unite all the VP portfolios. And because I have experience in student life, and it is a very important aspect of my platform, but still, president at its core is to unite VP positions, VP portfolios. And because because of my student life experience, I've worked with different committees, different student unions from different aspects of student governments. And like I said, from the third perspective, or within the system, it's very, very hard to see what the issues are and how to target it, how to fix it, how to position them, right? And that's why as the presidential candidate, I think I give that one aspect to this table, is I have already identified this issue through different avenues, through different perspectives, and I'm going to bring it here to UTSU because of these experience.
Could I have a follow-up?
Yes.
How do you plan to unite the portfolios when your priorities seem to directly conflict with what other candidates are proposing as part of their portfolios?
100%. And I think that's the one thing about UTSU and about the campaign is UTSU election in itself is so competitive, so cutthroat, you can never work with the candidates to begin with. And I think that's what I've been proposing in my platform, is we really need like a very non-formal event with all of the candidates to actually facilitate communication, to exchange idea even before the campaign happens. Because we are in a very competitive environment. We're in such a cutthroat environment. There's no chance for us to actually talk about how do we fix this issue together. And this is what we're trying to do. We actually need to unite everyone by the exchange of idea, by the facilitation of communication. And this is what we're not doing because UTSU itself is so competitive.
All right, my question is to all three candidates. I think Adrian has already answered this in part, so Adrian, feel free to not say a lot on this one. President's mandate includes a lot of things. That includes student life, that includes advocacy, but there are other positions like PU, PUA, FO, and XL that handle these portfolios as well. How will you ensure that you work with those positions as well as the board in a respectful and productive manner, especially if you have disagreements both on a kind of surface level policy level, but also if you have fundamental disagreements, how will you handle that?
Sure, I'm happy to answer this question. Of course, working in a team environment, it's important to remain respectful of other views, of other stances on these issues. We have, different viewpoints that, different viewpoints on these major issues. And what I hope to, reassert through this role is, is the major issues, is the issues of food insecurity, is the issues of affordable housing, and how are we going to, we can't change the changes to the OSAP program. So what can we do instead? How can we address affordability? And I've worked with people on campus to achieve a consensus on these kinds of issues. And so I think it's important to figure out what do we all agree on? And how can we focus on that? What aspects of affordability do we actually agree on? And how can we bring our different perspectives to work and create actually very creative solutions to these problems?
Hi. So, hopefully everybody who's on the team has the same kind of goal where they have the students' best interest in mind. I think that's kind of a great place to start. That's a foundation for all of us. Whenever we're arguing with each other, we have to remember, at the end of the day, what are we doing this for? We might have different ideas of how we get to a certain outcome, or we might have different ideas of what the students need, but obviously I'm happy to discuss those things and then come to a agreement about how we go about that. When I was on the Arts and Science Student Union, a lot of the executive members on my team, we did not agree on a lot of things. We did not agree on advocacy. We did not agree about releasing statements. We did not agree about putting student funds to certain things. And so there was a lot of discussion that happened. And obviously, I think that's the great thing about having also UTSU staff who can mediate those discussions. And so eventually we would compromise, or we would come to an agreement, or we would have a vote. Either way, we would come to a conclusion, and we would come back to that original value, which is what is the student body's best interest? We have to keep that in mind always.
Just a quick follow-up on that. What would you do if the student body was not aligned on it? What would you do if you can't default to the view of the student body because the student body is also divided?
One thing I think that the UTSU could do more of is actually poll the student body and ask how they're feeling about certain issues. When it comes to an issue, I think the one that's very contentious and on everybody's minds when they ask these sort of questions is Palestine advocacy, or saying that you're against Zionism or something like that, right? And we've seen thousands of students show up to protests. We've seen thousands of students. We saw the encampment. We saw sit-ins. It's very obvious that students actually do care about this issue, right? And obviously, I'm happy to poll the issue. I'm happy to ask them, before we, let's say, donate $50,000 to a Palestine relief fund, I'm happy to ask the students, do you feel like you want your student fees to go to that? Otherwise, instead, how can we support Palestinian students on campus here if they don't want their money to go abroad?
Just a brief follow-up to the follow-up. If you did that poll and you go back something like 52% in support and 48% against, what would you do? It's not a clear mandate, is it?
There's always ways we can compromise. Obviously, this is I don't know that this will necessarily happen. This is kind of a lot of nitpicking, but there's always ways that you can compromise. There's always ways that you can rehash an idea and say, okay, if it's really that close, if it's 50-50 sort of, how about this idea? Is this more likable, right? A lot of populist ideas are things like affordability, right? Or things like supporting students who have, who can't focus on their studies because they're traumatized, right? Those are things that are that are issues that affect a lot of people, that a lot of people will get behind. And I think there's ways that you can do it where it's I'm not even spending any of your money to get this idea out there to help these students, right? So why would we be against it, right? I think most of it is students don't want money being spent on things that are useless. And I think the UTSU is definitely capable of spending money on useless things, so let's not do that.
All right, yeah.
So this question is also for Safia. So I know that you mentioned a couple times about the UTSU's like huge budget, and Bill 33 presents us with an example of what a rainy day might look like. So I was wondering, do you believe that it's reckless to spend down reserve funding right as the biggest threat to standard funding faced in the UTSU's history has just appeared? And also to kind of touch on a specific point you made, is a new chair in someone's residence more important to the long-term financial sustainability of the UTSU?
Right, yeah. So I agree that it's definitely a huge problem. And yeah, so that's something that I would definitely discuss with the team, right? Like, what do we think in terms of, like, this is something that the VP of Finance would also help a lot with, right? What do we think is a good idea in terms of, like, should we take money from that reserve and how much money should we take? Like, obviously, I don't want to deplete it entirely. That would be insane, right? And then, you know, when it comes to whether or not we provide chairs to students, that's kind of lower on the accessibility list, right? Than like accessible washrooms, for example, having that in all buildings. That's extremely important, right? Like, people need washrooms, and that's not just for like people who have disabilities. I think this is an issue with, let's say, a lot of women, for example, where you need the extra space, you need the extra time, you need that environment for yourself because of, you know, anything that you're going through, right? So, I mean, that's something that I would obviously discuss with the team, right? Do we want to throw money at this issue before we've even, like, the chairs idea is just like one idea of how we can tackle accessibility on campus and one thing that affects a lot of students. But let's say we poll the students and they're like, that idea is terrible, like, I will just put pillows on my chair and figure it out. Then we don't have to spend that money, and let's put that money to something more useful, right? Let's put that money toward the ramp. Let's put that money towards the washrooms. Let's put that money towards, you know, groceries, to food, right? Yeah, so I mean, like, it's not set in stone, and I agree that to throw money at an issue before kind of gauging what the year is going to look like would be a little crazy. So I don't plan on doing that.
Great. Thank you. Is it okay if I ask just one more question?
Yes, quickly.
Thank you so much. I think this is for like kind of all the candidates, whoever wants to answer, but I was wondering, kind of jumping off of the question that was asked about how you would engage with university admin and potentially like engage in conflicts with them to advocate for students. I think that a big part of the UTSU is obviously to be able to support students in that regard against admin if they're not being responsive. However, the UTSU does have to work closely with a lot of administration, specifically the Office of the Vice Provost for students, in a lot of like structural capacity for elections, etc. So I was wondering how you would be able to kind of reconcile engaging in those conflicts and fighting for student needs while also at the same time knowing that the UTSU does obviously need to work with the admin as well in many different processes. And like one just specific point along with this is like, for example, I think like with Marie, you mentioned specifically like food advocacy that you've done on campus. And I know that the Office of the Vice Provost has recently responded in a way by hosting like a food jam where they invited a bunch of student organizers from different organizations just fighting for food justice too. So that was kind of them telling students like, hey, like we are acknowledging you and like we're being responsive, but obviously it's very performative. However, in like that kind of scenario where the administration has shown like, okay, like we're trying to appease you by doing this, but it's like a very performative activity, how would you be able to engage in like conflict in that sense and still advocate for students when the admin has been adamant that, you know, they have done something?
Yeah, I was part of why that event happened. So like I did the outreach, and I basically rallied together a bunch of student organizations and then I emailed the admin, and then they planned this event in response to that. And so yes, it's obviously not like what we want. It's not like, this is not the end. This is maybe a start. And I was at that event because I presented at that event with the VP Equity at the UTSU, at UTMSU, at CCSU. I work with them, and we exchanged a lot of ideas about currently what's working and what's not working. And there's been these food security jams hosted before. They've been hosted multiple times over the last decade, and they have led to no substantial, meaningful progress. But I do have allies on the Office of the Vice Provost. I've approached them for other projects. I know I can work with them effectively. And I know that I can also approach other university administrators. And I believe, through this office, through this higher leadership role, that we can ask for more. That, we can push for more, we can propose more innovative, solutions. I've talked to them regarding the grocery co-op plan, and they are very interested and excited about this project. So I know that I can effectively work with the Office of the Vice Provost, and if they're anything like other administrators, then I think that, we have a lot of good work ahead of us.
Okay. Technically, we're out of time, but this last question is very important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say it, and you're each going to get 30 seconds to respond. So keep it as concise as possible. Voter turnout is notoriously low. How will you get students to be more politically active on campus? Adrian, if you'd like to start.
Good point. Tying back to my AGM reform, I think the only way we can actually get students engaged is we as execs, we go down on the street, we go to the faculties, we go to the colleges and tell people twofold. Because this is our responsibility as UTSU exec to ensure a very smooth transition to the next cabinet. And the only way we can do it is through like a more engaging, a better election with more participation. And the only way we can do it is ourselves as UTSU executives go down to the street, talk to the people, tell them why it's important, tell them why it is very essential for you to vote.
Thank you. Marie?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to this issue of voter turnout. It is true that people are not turning out to vote, but telling them to vote is not necessarily going to work because people are apathetic and people are upset that it's not affordable to live in the city. It's not affordable to be a student. So we have to provide them options. We have to provide them a different vision, a structured long-term plan. Be on the grounds, engage with administrators, ask the hard questions, talk about these big issues like affordability, like Palestine, maybe show the students that, it's worth investing in these institutions because the UTSU is worth it. But
That's time. Thank you. Safia?
There's definitely an issue with voter turnout. There's also an issue with candidate turnout. I mean, the board of directors, 9 people ran, they all automatically get the position, right? Like, what is that? I think the UTSU just sending emails out, blasting emails to all the students, that's not effective. We need to have everybody involved in this, right? Like, maybe the professors will not do anything, but like, come on, students, TAs, student groups, student unions. I mean, I'm disappointed in my own arts and science student union. They didn't really say much either, right? They just posted on their story once, go vote. That's not enough.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. Good luck in the election. And that concludes the 2026 UTSU debate. Thank you for everyone who attended in person and online. And go vote.